Hey everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up my recent reads. So I have made a goal on my channel for the past couple years to try and wrap up every single book that I read on my channel, which usually means monthly wrap-ups, which is what I try to aim to do. But in February and March I didn't do wrap-ups, and in April I took a break from my channel, so that kind of messed up my March and April wrap-up, to be honest. So I have not wrapped up February, March, or April. I've only done one wrap-up so far this year. So I'm going to be doing a video where I go over all the books that I read for the past 3 months. And generally when I have a lot of books to wrap up, like anything over 1 month, I will basically do a different kind of format to make it easier and go a little bit quicker. So we have 25 books to wrap up today, and because of that I decided I'm going to do the reread, rewrite, burn tag with all of the books that I've read. I have seen this tag going around for years, since I first started watching BookTube. Maybe not back in 2013, but it's been around for a long time. But my friend Jan from Jan Agaton, she does this as her wrap-up method. If she still does wrap-ups, I can't remember, but when/if she does wrap-ups, she does them this way, and so I wanted to shout her out. But sometimes I also will do like tier ranker, sometimes I'll also do like a tier ranker or something like that, but I decided today that we are going to do the reread, rewrite, burn tag. Basically you pull 3 books out of the mug that I have. My sister gave me this mug for Christmas. I really like it. I love the color. And basically you say which one you're going to reread, which one you're going to rewrite, and which one you're going to burn. And I think that we will be having one extra left over, so we'll get to that part when we get there. And also I generally put in my stats for the video. I will pop them in, and I usually do that on my wrap-ups. Even when I have like 2 months to wrap up, I'll still put it in there. But I decided I'm not going to do that this month because we have 3 months and I feel like it would be a lot of stats, so I decided I'm not going to put them in there because it's a lot to insert. And if you are ever curious, I do have a reading shocker spreadsheet which I talk about in a video on my channel, and there is a free basic version. There's also a premium version that you could purchase if you would like, so that's where I track my stats in that spreadsheet. So I'm not going to be going over those. I will just tell y'all that I read 25 books total throughout the 3 months. I believe 8 of those were read in February, 10 were read in March, and 7 were read in April. I put all of the books in this jar, and we are just going to pull out 3 at a time and do the reread, rewrite, burn tag. So I kind of have to like mix them up because I did them in chronological order of how I read them. So I'm going to mix them up a little bit so we can get a little bit more variation. So I'm just going to choose these 3 right here. So the first one that I have is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I then also have Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. And then I have The Serpent in the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. So this is very difficult because these are all books that I gave 4.5 or 5 stars. They're some of my favorite books of the 3 months that I had. So this is very, very difficult, but I think I figured out what I'm going to do. So first I am going to reread Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I love this book. At first I was going to give it 4.5 stars, but I eventually rounded it up to 5 because this book has been staying on my mind. We basically follow our main character Alexis. One day she gets like stranded in a ditch when she's driving, and it's close to this small town. So this guy pulls over and basically helps her, and then she runs into him again at the bar and ends up going home with him. And turns out he has like a baby goat. He makes her grilled cheese. It's just like a really interesting time. But she is part of this legacy where she is a doctor and her family has been doctors for years, and I think it's been like over a century that the hospital that she worked at has had a doctor from her family working there for literally over a century. And her brother ends up not wanting to be there anymore, so she feels like all the responsibility is on her and that she has to basically like, you know, continue the legacy. And she's also kind of seen as the disappointment in her family. And I know that she is over 30, and as I said, she's an ER doctor, and she is also very much like a city girl. She kind of feels drawn to this man, but she knows that they would never really work out because he's from a small town. But then she also finds out that he is in her 20s, but they kind of realize that their chemistry is very much undeniable. So she spends a lot of time with them, and she grows very close to Daniel, which is the man, and she also grows very close to the town. I feel like this is very much like a found family book because she finds a family in this town because her family is not really good to her. She has a good relationship with her brother, but he's not in this book very much. You find out why in the book. I don't want to spoil it, but I feel like she doesn't really have a good relationship with her family. She has always kind of grown up very rich in a very cold environment. So being in this very small town, she's learning about Daniel, she's learning about the town, how she can feel loved, but then she's also kind of learning a lot about herself and her capabilities and what she's good at, and that she is not just like a mere ER doctor who is a disappointment of her family. And I just love this book. I feel like they had so much chemistry. And so for me to like a traditionally published white romance is just very uncommon nowadays. Like, I don't really like them as much. So for the fact that I love this one so much, they just had such good chemistry. Abby Jimenez's writing is so amazing, and it's very comedic, but it's also very serious at times. I feel like she dives into a lot of very serious topics through our main character, but then also side characters. And I just love this one so much. It had so much heart and so much like hilarious lines, and it just was very real. So I would have to reread this one. Now The Hunger Games I'm going to rewrite, and it's not because I think anything in this book needs to be rewritten at all. It's because that this was actually a reread for me. I originally read these books back in 2013, and it is what got me really into reading. I've been a reader my entire life, but when I made the move from New Jersey to North Carolina right before 5th grade, I stopped reading for about a year probably, and I wasn't really into it too much. So my friend asked me at the time in 5th grade if I wanted to go see Catching Fire with her, which was the movie that was coming out at the time. So I ended up watching the first movie, saw Catching Fire, and I became obsessed, and I read this series, and it's what got me into reading. So I decided with my patrons that we were going to do a read along for this series and reread all of the original trilogy and The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I have not read, but I have seen the movie. So this was our first reread of the year. We are currently technically on The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but we have not yet done the live show for Mockingjay because we do them in the middle of the month. So if you would still like to join us for that, my Patreon is always linked down below, and it is my top 2 tiers that get access to this read along. But if you don't know what this is about, we follow Katniss Everdeen, and she is a girl that lives in this world of Panem where there is basically districts in the capital, and the capital is very, very rich, and even the like first couple districts tend to be really rich, but she is from District 12, and that is like the last district that currently exists. So she is one of the poorest districts around, and there is this thing every year called the Hunger Games where basically they elect 2 children out of the 12 districts. For our main character Katniss, her sister Prim, this is the first year she could enter into the Hunger Games, so of course Prim's name gets pulled and she's supposed to go to the Hunger Games. So Katniss, our main character, volunteers as tribute to go to the Hunger Games instead of her sister. I really love this book. I think I gave it 4.5 stars because Catching Fire is my favorite. So yeah, but this one I think is just so amazing. It's so timely. Like literally, I was thinking about the Met Gala and everything happening in Gaza right now. I was like, that is like literally the capital and the Hunger Games. Like, it's literally so timely to today. I think Suzanne Collins did an amazing job writing a story that literally transcends time, and the writing is pretty simple. It is very easy to read because it is young adult, and it is young adult from a while ago. When did this book come out? Probably like 2007 or something. 2008, I guessed almost right. So the writing is a little bit simple, which is not my favorite, but I know it's for a younger audience, so that's understandable. But I had such a good time reading this. I think if I was to rewrite it, I think I would just make the writing a little bit more complex, just because that's kind of what I read now. I don't really read young adult books, but I know this is for a young adult audience. This is just me being nitpicky. I wouldn't actually rewrite it, but for the sake of this little tag, I'm gonna rewrite it. So I Guess I Have to Burn The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This is the first book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series. I actually run a book club with my friend Nicole. It's called Swoon Sisters. It's a romance book club. We just started it back up this year, and we are doing quarterly picks. And so this was our first quarter pick, and we chose this book, as I said. We follow our main character, Oriya. I can't really say it, Oriah. And she is the adopted human daughter of the Nightborn Vampire King, and in this world there is this thing called the Kajari, which is a tournament held by the goddess of death herself, and the person who wins the Kajari gets a wish, basically. So our main character Oriah enters into the competition basically to try and get a wish, and she knows it's going to be very difficult because the majority of the people who enter the Kajari are also vampires. Humans aren't very common in this world, let alone they survive to enter the Kajari. So she knows it's going to be very difficult for her because she's going to be fighting against bloodthirsty vampires, but she's been training. And she ends up having to team up with this other vampire, and they might have a little bit of tension. This book is very, very good. I loved it. There's literally nothing wrong with it. I gave it 4.5 stars. It just didn't give me that 5-star feeling. I will say that this does have like a lot of action and fighting sequences in it, which aren't always my favorites. I do love a tournament and I love like trials and things like that, but I generally like them to be a little bit more like interesting. I feel like in this one it very much was like people fighting against each other. There was kind of some complexities added in, but I do wish that there was kind of like less fighting, just for my own personal taste, because I just don't think that's my favorite in any book really, and this book was just very heavily like fighting, which I still enjoyed, and I can't really fault the book for being that way. That's just like my only gripe with it. But I loved the characters, I loved the tension and the romance. I think it was so well done. I love this world of vampires and the Kajari and how humans play a role in that. And I am also extremely interested in continuing on in the series, so in that way I can see more of the world building and find out more about like the lore in this book. But unfortunately I'm gonna have to burn her because these other two are like phenomenal. Like this is also phenomenal, but those two are like a different level to me than this one. So unfortunately she's gonna have to get burned, but I still highly recommend her. I think she is a great fantasy romance. So now we are going to pull the next 3. So I'm just reaching in and pulling out 3. So the first one is Flawless by Elsie Silver. Then I have The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. And then lastly I have Homicide and Hollow Hollow by Mia P. Mansala. So this one's a little bit easier for me to do. I am going to burn Homicide and Hollow Hollow. This is the second book in the Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery series. The first one is Arsenic and Adobo, which I really liked. And this one is the sequel. Cozy Mysteries honestly don't really like stick in my head that much, like the distinct plots. I don't know if that's anybody else or just me. That Cozy Mysteries, like maybe the first book in the series will stick out, but then past that, like I kind of just, they all blend together. But this one takes place during a beauty pageant that's happening in the town, and I believe our main character, she actually won this pageant years ago, so she's very involved in the pageant this time around. When she won this competition years ago, it actually drove a wedge between her and I believe it's her cousin slash rival is what it says. But when the head judge of the pageant is actually murdered and her cousin is put as the suspect, she begins to investigate the murder mystery, and she also works at her aunt's restaurant, and she wants to open up her own cafe but has not yet. This one was okay. It was pretty good. I don't think it was as good as the first one, which I believe I gave 4 stars, and I think I gave this one a 3 or 3.5. I just am not a huge fan of like the beauty pageant element that was happening in this. I wasn't really entertained by it at all, and I think like it could have been kind of something a little bit different, and that was just my personal taste. And there is kind of like some romantic tensions in this book, which I also really enjoyed. And I really enjoyed the writing and Cozy Mysteries, like their formula overall, but this one was just not like a standout one for me, so it's gonna get burned. Then the one that's gonna get rewritten, I gave 4 stars, and that is Flawless by Elsie Silver. Now this is not a book that I ever thought that I would enjoy, because this is actually a cowboy romance. I wouldn't, okay, he's not a cowboy, he's a bull rider, but it's definitely more of like a country romance, and I'm not someone who grew up in the country at all. I live in North Carolina, but I literally live in the capital city, so like we have cows and horses down my street, but like I live in a city, and I literally grew up in New Jersey my entire life, and not in like the rural parts of New Jersey. I grew up 20 minutes away from New York City, so I'm very much a city girl at heart. But our main character in this, she is actually kind of a city, so we follow Rhett Eaton, and he is kind of the face of bull riding, but he has a scandal that happens where he basically says he doesn't like milk. It's filmed and put out on the internet, and he actually has a sponsorship with a milk company, so this blows up in his face. So he is told that he needs to clean up his image by his like publicist slash manager. So the publicist slash manager sends his own daughter, which her name is Summer, to basically babysit and look after him and make sure he doesn't screw up anymore. So she's definitely like a talker. He thinks that she's really sexy. She ends up bonding with Rhett's family, and they just have like a really good dynamic. But Rhett is also known as a playboy, but he kind of quickly realizes that Summer is not like an easy conquest like every other girl. So we just kind of follow their romance, and I feel like they definitely had a heartfelt romance for sure. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't necessarily like one of my favorites. I would still definitely recommend it because I loved the writing, and I feel like if an author made me enjoy a kind of like cowboy country bull riding romance, that says a lot. And I maybe not, because you know what, I used to love the Hannah Montana movie Down. I loved that movie, so I feel like it's kind of giving similar vibes, honestly. But I really did have such like a good time reading this romance. It could have had a little bit more depth and nuance to it, similar to Part of Your World. I feel like that one perfectly balances like having very hilarious, witty banter, but then also having a lot of heart. And I feel like this one didn't have as much of either. It was kind of towards the middle for both of them. This one is not like a favorite romance of all time, but it definitely was really fun, and I can't wait to continue on in the series because I know everybody says like the second book is their favorite. So I don't know what I would rewrite about it, to be honest with you, but I really had a good time with that book. And then lastly, the one I'm going to reread is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. She strikes again. I think I gave this one 4.5 stars. I don't think I gave it the full 5 because I love The 7 Year Slip by this author. It was one of my favorite books of last year. I literally adore that book. And this one to me was not like the same level as that book, but I still like loved it. Like, I love Ashley Poston's writing. She writes such deep romances that have a really compelling darker element to them. The first book that I read, The 7 Year Slip, had a element of like suicide and grief, and this one also does have grief elements in it as well. And so we follow our main character Florence, and she is a ghostwriter for one of the most prolific romance authors in the industry. But she has a problem because after her breakup, she doesn't feel like she can really believe in love anymore, and that she can't really write romance anymore. And her book that's coming up is on deadline, and she gets this new editor that seems like really harsh. And so she's just like lost. She's like, what do I even do? Because I can't really write because I don't believe in romance anymore. This deadline is pushing me, and this new man who's like kind of sexy but kind of gruff is my new editor, and he's also pushing me. And then she gets a ball dropped on her. She gets a phone call basically saying that her dad passed away. So she ends up going home, obviously, and her family actually owns a funeral home. So it's very easy for them to like take care of the arrangements for her father, but obviously it's still like a big shock to lose one of your parents. Like, that's a huge thing, especially when you grew up very close to your parents. And she actually also has a power, you could say, where she can see ghosts. It's not very explained in the books. Both her books that I read have magical realism elements in them, but they're not really explained. They're definitely like magical realism and not like fantasy, because there's no real world building about it. There's no explanation. It's just kind of like a magical element that's a part of the story. So she ends up showing up to the funeral home, and she doesn't see her dad or anything like that, but she ends up seeing the editor that she has. And so she's like, what the hell? And he doesn't know how he died. He doesn't even know that he's dead, really. So she's trying to help him move along in the afterlife while also grieving her own father. And I just love this book so much. I love the talks of grief, but grief elements always hits home for me. Like, I love grief horror. I love this element of grief, and also like The 7 Year Slip, because I feel like I really connect to it. Grief is something that I know is coming for me, and I'm very, very scared because I don't know how I'm going to handle it. So I think it's very cathartic for me to see other people going through grief and them handling it. It just feels very cathartic for me, even though it's not something I personally experienced very traumatically. I have experienced grief, but not anything huge like losing a parent, but still, like, seeing it just means so much to me. So I just absolutely love this book, and I love Ashley Poston's writing and the way that she weaves magical realism elements into her stories. Okay, I'm chatting today, but I have the next 3 to pull. I have Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris, and I also have My Sister the Serial Killer. And then lastly, I have Daisies for Innocence by Bailey Cottrell. First up, I'm going to burn Daisies for Innocence. This is just a cozy mystery, and this was fine. It was a fun cozy mystery. I think I gave it 3 stars. I wanted to read it for spring because it takes place in like a perfumery, and I heard it's a really good spring cozy mystery, which it was, but it just wasn't anything stand out. The writing was mid, the characters were mid. Honestly, I really couldn't tell you the plot of this because it was very forgettable for me. As I said, it was just like an average cozy mystery, so I am going to burn it. Then for rewrite, I'm going to rewrite My Sister the Serial Killer, which was one of my Patreon book club picks for the past couple months. And this one followed our main character, and her sister has basically killed 3 of her boyfriends now, and her sister, our main character, has helped her clean it up. And she her sister always claims it's in self-defense and everything like that, so she believes her and helps her. But now she's like, my sister is basically a serial killer because she's killed 3 people now and has gotten away with it. Now she's kind of worried because our main character works at a hospital, and one of the doctors that she's had a crush on and has been interested in for forever, her sister has now set her sights on him, and she is scared that he's going to be the next victim and get killed next. So we basically just follow their sister relationship. We follow a lot of them and their family dynamics, and this one I believe takes place in Nigeria. I could be wrong, but I believe it takes place in Nigeria. I'm pretty sure. And so I really liked that kind of discussion as well, and seeing the culture and the different dynamics. But I would rewrite this one to be a little bit more thrillery, because it's kind of not. It's basically a literary fiction book, and so we've all mostly liked their dynamics and not much of like killing or cleaning up. We do see a little bit of the cleanup in the beginning of the book, but it's mostly just our main character worrying about her sister, her dynamics with her sister. If you want to see my full thoughts on this, I post reading vlogs for each of my Patreon book club picks. I think this was the one of them the past couple months the footage got corrupted, so I had to scrap that vlog, and I think that might have been this one, but I do also have a full live show that I do for each of my picks as well. So if you want to see full thoughts, that's over there. And then the one I'm going to reread is Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. This one I actually just read in April because I did not post my April TBR, but I did have a prompt that was mom pick. So I called her and asked her what book she wanted me to read, and she said this one. And so I felt bad, even though I didn't follow my April TBR because I didn't post it. I wanted to read this one because every time I talked to her, she was like, have you read that book yet? Have you read that book yet? And so I was like, let me just go ahead and read it. This one follows Jack and Grace, which are a newlywed couple, and he is a lawyer that has basically been undefeated, and she is like the perfect homemaker, and she just stays at home. And she also has a sister with Down syndrome, I believe it is. She is disabled in some sort of capacity, and I believe it's Down syndrome, and so they help take care of her as well. They just seem to have the perfect life and that they're inseparable, but obviously behind closed doors things are a little bit more sinister. And I did really like this one. My mom gave it 5 stars, like she loved it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I thought it was a really good thriller, and I see how, especially at the time it was published, let's look when it was published in 2016, which was now 8 years ago. I could definitely see how this would kind of be like a revolutionary domestic thriller, and I'm not a huge fan of domestic thrillers anymore. Like I don't know if I was ever a big fan of them to begin with. Like there are certain ones that I like and a lot that I don't. I don't think domestic thrillers are my favorite type of thriller, but this one I just did really enjoy, and I thought, even though it wasn't like shocking or plot twist filled, which is generally how I like my thrillers, I feel like I was still like surprised by certain things, and I was definitely like intrigued, and it was a very fast read. It was very addicting as well, so I would reread that one. Now we are going to move on to the next 3 books. So I have, let's see, Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. I have That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. And then lastly, I have Heartstopper Volume 5 by Alice Oseman. Okay, I feel like unfortunately I have to burn That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon because I think I gave this one 3.5 stars. I did really enjoy it though. It's such like a fun, cozy fantasy. So we follow my character Cinnamon, and she lives a very quiet, peaceful life. That's what she wants. She maybe like wants to get a cat. Her family owns a spice family, so all of her and her siblings are named after spices. She ended up in a wine-drunk stupor and ended up saving a demon, Fallon, and he reveals that the god or goddess that they worship is actually evil, and basically enslaves his people, like the demons. So Cinnamon ends up going on an adventure with him to save the demons and basically reveal that this goddess is evil. And I just really loved this one. I had such a good time with it. Like, it was really just like a cozy fantasy to me, but it was very adventure filled, and we met a lot of different characters along the way, a lot of different breeds of demons, and I just thought it was so fun. And Cinnamon is so like fiery and quirky, and I haven't really seen many cozy fantasies or like fantasy romances or anything like that written by Black authors, and this one is written by a Black author with a Black main character. And someone commented on a video that me and her look alike, and we kind of do. Her hair is just purple and she's darker skinned than me, but like besides that, we're kind of giving the same. And I just had such a good time. Like, I loved the banter in this book and the adventureness of it. I thought it was so good, but unfortunately it has to get burned because these other two books, I really loved them. So next up to rewrite, I'm going to rewrite Daisy Hates, and the corner got bent in my move, so I'm kind of sad. But this is the second book in the Magnolia Parks universe. This is the first Daisy Hates books, because if you don't know, basically in Magnolia Parks, all the odd books are Magnolia Parks, and then all of the even books are Daisy Hates. And they basically follow different characters, but they're all in the Magnolia Parks universe. So we follow Daisy Hates, and she is the princess of London's most notorious family that's basically like a mob family. Like, her parents died, and so her brother basically runs it, and it's basically like a gang mob kind of thing. They steal very famous art, very expensive art, and they sell it, but they do a lot of other things as well. And she also ends up falling for this boy named Christian, and Christian is actually in love with his best friend's girlfriend, on and off girlfriend, Magnolia Parks, which we know from the first book. And so we follow their romance, obviously, but I feel like this book was a little bit like darker because of like those kind of mob elements, and I really enjoyed that. I gave both this book and Magnolia 4 stars, but I think I like them for different reasons. I love Magnolia because of the relationship. Like, I love the relationship in that book, and this one I wasn't completely sold on the relationship, but I liked the plot more. I feel like it had more plot in it, and I really liked how Daisy is very much like, oh, I don't like anybody, like, I don't like people. I feel like that's very relatable. Now we also get the perspective of her brother Julian in this, so we get Daisy, Christian, and Julian, and so I really enjoyed Julian's perspective. Like, I loved him, so I feel like I like them for different reasons. Like, I feel like I enjoyed the characters and the plot more in this one, but I enjoyed the relationship more, Magnolia, and the toxicity of that one more. But I would rewrite this one maybe just so I could be more convinced of Daisy and Christian's relationship than I was, because I wasn't necessarily rooting for them yet. And then lastly, I would reread Heartstopper Volume 5. I love Heartstopper. I don't think I love it as much as like other people. I haven't even seen the show yet, but I really do like the graphic novel series. I give basically everyone 5 stars. I can't remember if I gave this one 4.5 or 5 stars, but I really like this one. And so this one had like a lot about like the future and going to university and stuff like that, which I really enjoyed, because the past couple Heartstopper volumes have been a little bit heavier with talk of like eating disorders and stuff like that, which I really enjoy as well. But this one, it was more about like recovery of that, and then also like going on into the future. And I was literally just there 3 years ago looking at colleges, so I really related to the characters in this story. Even though I'm like a little past it now, it felt very reminiscent of that time for me, so I really enjoyed that, and seeing them kind of navigating a relationship in that time, because I did not have to deal with that. I was not really like, that did not impact my college decision at all. And so I feel like seeing that was very interesting to me, so I would definitely reread this one because I had such a good time with it. I always love every installment in the series. Okay, next up, we're getting closer to the bottom, so I'm going to pull these 3. First up, we have The Weekend Retreat by Tara Lazowski. Then we have The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. And then lastly, we have Diavola by Jennifer Thorne. So 2 of these were actually my book club picks, both The Weekend Retreat and Diavola. I can never say it right. I say Diavola, but I think when you are pronouncing it in Italian, it's Diavola. I think that's what my patrons have told me. But both those books were Patreon book club picks as well. And unfortunately, I'm going to burn The Weekend Retreat because this one basically follows a group of siblings. I think it's 3 of them, and they are part of like this Van Ness family, and the matriarch of the family has passed away. So this is the first time they're having kind of like this like weekend retreat at their winery that they own since the matriarch has died. And so each of them bring along their significant others. Some are married, some are not. And there's like this big storm coming, and they all have secrets. So it's kind of just like like revealing their secrets, and maybe like a murder happens and there's like this big storm, and it was just like average to me. I think I gave it like 2.5 stars. It was just like an average book. It was like an okay thriller. There was nothing about it that was like extremely exorbitantly horrible, but there was nothing in it that I really loved either. So I just gave it 2.5 stars. It was just middle of the road. I would probably never think about it again after I talk about it here. It was just average. I wouldn't really recommend it because I think it's kind of like a waste of time, but if you do read it, it's also not like the end of the world. It's not like gonna cause extreme hatred or anything. Then I would rewrite Diabola, I think is how you say it, by Jennifer Thorne. This was my other Patreon book club pick. And this one we follow our main character, I can't remember her name, Anna. And she goes on this vacation with her family to Italy. And she has a sister and a twin brother, I believe. And her sister is married with kids. And she's kind of like the black sheep of the family. She has 2 rules for the Pace family destination vacations: tread lightly and survive. Her mom constantly criticizes her. Her dad is just kind of there. Her sister is very uptight and has her kids to look after, and also some weird things may be happening in this village. Just some like weird like curtain shifting, and the villagers are like, why y'all staying there? So our main character is kind of like, what's going on with the villa, and just some like weird things are happening. I obviously have a whole reading vlog of this and the weekend retreat and live shows for both of them over on my Patreon, and I gave this one like 3 stars because it was just okay. I really liked the kind of Italian elements of this. It kind of gave me the vibes of that new movie with Sydney Sweeney. Why am I forgetting it right now? I really like that movie a lot, with her as a nun, but I really like that movie. And even though it doesn't have to do with a nunnery, it also takes place in Italy. It kind of has some like darker elements because it's horror and this is horror. They have completely different types of horror, though, I will say that, and I enjoyed that movie more than I enjoyed this, because I would say only half this book takes place on vacation and the other half doesn't. I wanted this to be like a really good like summer horror book, because I feel like the only ones we really have are like slashers for real, and like the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. So I wanted this one to be another really good one, and I think I would still recommend this for that type of thing. Like if I was doing a recommendations video on summer book recs, I would put this probably in the horror category, because I really liked kind of like the atmospheric elements, and I enjoyed the characters, and I feel like this one is kind of like a slow descent into madness, which I like, but I wasn't a huge fan of the horror elements, which I kind of knew going in, because this is more like paranormal kind of horror, which is not my favorite. So I kind of knew that, but sometimes it can work for me. But I also didn't like how like half this book wasn't even at the vacation, and I wish it was, because I wanted more of like those vibes. So that's really like my criticism, and I feel like I would just write this so like the whole book took place in Italy on this vacation. And then lastly, I would reread The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. I gave this one 4 stars. This was a pretty good thriller, and I really liked it because our main character Fern, she is neurodivergent, and I'm also neurodivergent, and we have kind of some differences in our neurodivergency, but it still was like really good representation, and I enjoyed seeing someone else kind of go through similar things that I go through. So this one does follow Fern, as I say, and she's neurodivergent, and she works at the local library. She has dinner with her twin sister multiple nights a week. She just lives a very like calm, quiet life. So Fern basically finds out that her twin sister Rose cannot get pregnant, so she decides she's going to do something for her sister and get pregnant and have a baby for her. But she needs to find a father, and so we kind of follow that. This one is a thriller, and the end did shock me, but I thought this one was a little bit slow in pace, but I really enjoyed where the story ended up, and I enjoyed the representation and Fern and Rose as characters. And so even though this one was a little bit slow to me, I still think it's a really good thriller, and I would highly recommend it, so I would reread this one. Okay, moving on to the next 3. We only have a few left in here. I think we have one more round after this. And so the first one is Tender by Beth Hetland. Then we have One of Our Own by Lucinda Berry. And then we have Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. So I would burn Tender. This was actually an arc that I had that was a graphic novel. So this one basically follows a woman, and it's kind of more like a psychological thriller, which I've never seen in a graphic novel before, which is what intrigued me to this one. And she basically tries to paint this perfect picture of life and become like the perfect friend, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, and she ends up going through a horrible loss. So if you have any triggers for pregnancy loss, I would be very careful of this one because it's very heavily into that. But then she begins to kind of display symptoms of pregnancy, but she's not pregnant. And she also kind of has some like weird things. Like this one has like a lot of body horror in it. I think I ended up giving this one at 3.5 stars because I thought it was good and I liked the direction that it went in. I liked the art a lot, but I feel like it could have been explained more, and I felt like it kind of just like had this really good setup and then kind of devolved into kind of a little bit nonsensical. And I feel like that could definitely be like commentary for sure and could have been purposeful, but I feel like there could have been a little bit more exploration in there that could have been done, and I think it also could have been a little bit longer. But overall, I think it was pretty good and I would recommend it if you're interested in it, because I've never really read a graphic novel like this before, but it has to be burned for the purposes of this game. And then to rewrite, I'm going to rewrite One of Our Own by Lucinda Berry. This one I ended up giving 4.5 stars. I love this one. This one is an audio exclusive. I got mine from Libro FM because I'm part of their ALC program as a like creator, because if you have at least 1,000 followers on any platform and you review books, you can sign up to be part of their ALC and you get 10 free new release audiobooks every month. And so this was one of the ones a couple months ago because it just came out this year and I loved it. We basically follow a woman who works at a call center for like a suicide call center, and she gets a call from a girl who goes to her son's school, and she like wants to commit suicide and is talking about how there was basically like boys that took advantage of her and like videos and pictures of her online now. So that's really like driving her to have the suicidal ideation. And so our main character loses the call but ends up staying in connection with this girl. She is also very worried about her son and like if he like knows anything about it, because it happened at a party and she believes he went to like the same party. And this one has so many like audio effects in it. Like when they're on the calls, it really sounds like they're on a call, and I think that this was like a really well produced audiobook. Like I love thriller audiobooks that have like all these different elements in it, so I think it was super well done and I loved where it went in the end. Like I think Lucinda Berry knows how to write a very engaging story that even though this one was very short, it was very engaging. It had a very interesting mystery, and where it went in the end, I see like looking back now, I'm like, oh, okay, like that makes sense, like from the beginning. Like I should have known that, and like even from the title, I feel like I should have known where it was heading, but I didn't, and so I was like shocked, but like in a really good way. Like I loved where it went in the end, so I don't know what I would rewrite about it because I loved it so much. Maybe just making it into a fuller length book because I loved it so much, and I could read Lucinda Berry's writing like all day because I just love it so much. But this one was like really, really good, and I highly recommend it. I know it's only available on audio, so it may not be for everybody, but I really loved it. And then the last one that I would reread was actually a reread for me, and that is Catching Fire. As I said, I'm rereading this series with my Patreon, and so we read this one a couple months ago, and I love this one. This is my favorite book in the series. I'm not going to talk about the plot too much because it's going to be spoilery, and I already talked about the plot of The Hunger Games, but basically this is the sequel. It continues the story of Katniss, and this one is definitely my favorite. Like I just love how we see a lot of the things from the first book coming into play, but then also a lot of things from even the third book looking back coming into play. And like there is like this big ideal throughout the whole series if you don't know about like revolution, and I feel like that starts to come into play in this book, and I just loved it. Like I love it, and one of my favorite characters, Finnick Odair, gets introduced in this book, so I was just so happy to read it, and I would definitely reread this one. Also, can I just say I did a really good job at reading my physical books these past couple months. 18 of the books I read of the 25 physically. That is phenomenal. Like I'm so proud of myself because I'm really trying to read books that I physically own. So that means almost 2/3, 72% of the books that I read, I physically own. Like that's so good of me. But we are moving on to the last, oh, that's strange. Oh no, okay, I have one more set after this set. So first up we have Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. Then we have Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldry. And then lastly we have A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. Okay, I know what I'm gonna do. So firstly I'm going to burn Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. This one kind of hurts because I think I gave this one 3 stars, and I love Elizabeth Acevedo's work. Like all of her young adult work I've given like 4.5 and 5 stars. Like I love it, and this was her first adult book, and I knew a lot of people did not love this, so I was holding off for a while, but this one basically just follows women in this family, and there's this one specific woman in this family that she could predict the day when someone is going to die, and she decides to host this living wake where she's gonna have a wake for herself, but she's still alive. So people are like, is she predicting her own death? Like, is she about to die? And we follow a lot of the other women in her family in the days leading up to it, on the day of it, and even after. I think this one had a lot of interesting things to talk about that I really liked. Like, a lot of women's issues were talked about in this story, and I loved that. I love seeing that through this family, and of course I love the writing, but I do feel like it was a little slow and a little boring. Also, like, a lot of the characters were mixing together, and like it was harder for me to differentiate between them and their perspectives, which just wasn't my favorite. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to burn this one, which makes me sad because I love Elizabeth Acevedo, but it has to happen. And then the one I'm going to rewrite is Bookshops in Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. This one I gave like 4.5 stars. It is the prequel to Legends and Lattes, and so that one follows Viv and Orc, and she decides that she's going to open a coffee shop in this town, and they've never seen coffee before, so she has to like introduce them to it. And so we see her from literally building it and putting the wooden nails together to her, you know, hiring more people. And so this one follows Viv before, when she was actually in war, because she used to be in battle and like be a soldier basically, and she gets injured, so her platoon, I don't know if that's like the word, but her group leaves her in this town to basically heal up and rest, and she ends up coming across this little bookshop and kind of becomes friends with the bookshop owner. They also begin to like work to like fix up the bookshop and make it more profitable, and I just really enjoyed this one a lot. Like, I love these kind of cozy fantasies. I think that they are so fun, and they're like really like the perfect type of fantasy for me because they're not too heavy, they're not too like plot driven, and I really like that they're very character driven, which I'm a character driven reader, and there's not much like world building or anything like that, which I really like because I can sometimes get lost. So I just really enjoy like these kind of cozy fantasies, and this one being about bookshops and seeing Viv like start to read and stuff too was so fun. So I would definitely rewrite something about this one. I don't know what, because I just really liked it as it was. And then lastly, the one that I would reread, which I gave 5 stars, is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. This big book, I finally read it and I was really proud of myself. This one basically follows Nesta, which is the sister of Feyre in the ACOTAR series, which follows her. This is like a continuation of the ACOTAR series. Like, there's the original trilogy, and then now she's continuing it on with different characters. And so I don't want to talk too much about Feyre or where she is in this book, because I feel like that spoils a lot of the ACOTAR series, which I know a lot of people have read, but a lot of people still have not. So I don't want to spoil it at all. But this book series basically follows like Fae in the Fae world, and Feyre, the main character in the first book, is a human, and we follow Feyre's sister in this. And this one had so much to do with mental health, and I loved it. I love Nesta and who she ends up with in this book. I also don't want to spoil that, even though I feel like it's very much talked about in this series. But I loved like seeing Feyre again, and like all the other side characters, and even Rhysand. Like, I loved him, and like the Bat Boys are just so iconic, and I love seeing them, and like the mental health talk that is in this book is so phenomenally done, and like the empowerment is just so great, and I love this book. I feel like I literally don't remember like any of the plot though. Like, anything related to like the plot I don't remember, except I remember a little bit, but towards the end I started like not paying attention, just being like Nesta, 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 because I just love her. And so yeah, I just really love this series and this book, and I know a lot of people have a lot of things to say about Miss Sarah, and I'm not the biggest fan of Sarah fans because I feel like they're a little bit down the throat. And so I'm not going to tell you that you need to read Sarah J Maas because she's a little bit problematic, but I'm a girl and I think that I should be able to read what I want to read. That's just me. I already own the book. I've owned it for years since it came out, so I was gonna read it regardless. Okay, and the last 3 that I have, we will still have one left over, which we will talk about at the end. But the last 3 that we have is By the Book by Jasmine Guillory. Then we have A Love Song for Ricky Wilde by Tia Williams. And lastly, we have The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, which I actually do own as well. It's just downstairs. Like, I forgot it because it's in a box set. I bought the box set of the whole series. So if that tells you anything. This is actually hard for me because these two books, I don't know which one I'm gonna do for which, because I really enjoyed both of these. This one was a little bit disappointing, and I think I gave this one 3.5, but I feel like this one has a more merit in some regards than this book, but I think I'm gonna burn this one. I love Tia Williams. 7 Days in June is one of my favorite books of all time. I love it, and I feel like she still shined in this book. Like, I love her writing, and I think it's so beautiful, but this one had a time travel element in it, and I do like that. I feel like that's in some other books that I like. I do like magical realism in my romances, but I wasn't like the huge fan of how it was done in this book necessarily. I thought it was just okay, and I wasn't super attached to the characters like how I was in the 7 Days in June, which made me just a little bit disappointed. I know a lot of other people have loved this book, and they like are saying that Tia Williams done it again and she put her foot in it, and like, I would still very much recommend this one. I think it's amazing for springtime because our main character, I think she opens a flower shop, and she is very much about like finding new paths and growing and becoming a new person. So I feel like this one has a lot of themes of growth, and has a lot of talk of flowers, because our main character Ricky decides that, you know, she's also kind of the black sheep of her family, and she's going to move to New York City and open up this flower shop. And she ends up on an evening in February, night blooming jasmine, which are out of season, fill the air, and she meets a handsome, deeply mysterious stranger, and we kind of follow them, of course. But as I said, there's a magical realism element in this, and it just was not necessarily my favorite. I don't know if I enjoy necessarily when Tia Williams does magical realism. I've only read 2 of her books, but I don't know if like she wrote another magical realism book, if I would like that one either. I don't want to burn it because I love Tia, but this was my least favorite of the 3. So that means I'm going to rewrite by the book by Jasmine Guillory. I've read from Jasmine Guillory before and thought it was just okay, but this one I thought was really, really good. We follow Isabel, and she works at a publishing house, and she is like the assistant editor, I believe. She's one of the few black employees at the publishing house as well. She's overworked and underpaid. She overhears her boss complaining that this very high profile author has not been getting back to them about the book. So she decides that she is going to go to where he lives and basically be like, hey, yo, what's up? Like, where the book at? He is kind of like, oh, actually, you low-key really helped me. So, like, you're going to stay with me. We're going to work it out with your boss, and you're going to help me write this book. So that's what ends up happening. And this one I just thought was really interesting because I enjoyed seeing the talk of like the publishing industry and seeing them write, and it's very much like a Grumpy Sunshine kind of vibe. I believe it's actually supposed to like relate to Beauty and the Beast, and I definitely see that a lot. That's why it has like the roses and stuff, and I just thought this was like a really fun romance. It's not anything to like write home about. It's not like the most amazing romance that I've ever read, or like it was mind-blowing, but it was just fun and I enjoyed it. And then lastly, we have The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, which I'm going to reread. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I loved it. I cannot wait to continue the series. And so we follow our main character Cassie in this, and she has a natural talent for reading people, and she kind of just like doesn't pay much attention to it, but then the FBI comes knocking at her door asking her to join this kind of task force that they put together of teenagers who have natural talents to try and solve cold cases. But she is also very interested in kind of working with the FBI because her mom was murdered and disappeared years ago, and she never really got any closure from that, and she doesn't really like know what happened. So she decides that she's going to join this team. Of course, there's kind of like romance. It's young adults, there's romance and a lot of things that happen, but it's very much giving like Criminal Minds but make it teenagers, which is how everybody pitches it, but that's really how it is. And like I feel like this one, like, it went kind of dark. Like, for a YA thriller, like, I think it went a little dark. Like, this is darker than some of the other thrillers I've talked about that are adults. It's not the darkest thriller I've ever read. It's no Karen Slaughter. But, like, it goes a little dark. And then the last book we have to talk about is Binti, and this one was okay for me. I gave it 3 stars. Honestly, I don't have much to say. It is a sci-fi little novella, and this one I read as an audiobook, and I feel like that was very detrimental to my reading experience because it is so sci-fi. Like, I feel like it's very heavy on the sci-fi, and so I feel like I was very confused throughout a lot of it, and like I feel like I definitely need to give this one a reread to accurately give you like even a synopsis, because I was very lost through reading this, and I even restarted it a couple times and I was just very lost. I thought I owned this one physically, but I don't. I was confusing it with another book, and I can't even reread this one physically right now. But I really don't have much to say because I was just very, very confused throughout the course of that book. But those are the books that I read the past couple months. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I'm really proud that I was able to read so many physical books off my TBR. Like, I really ate. So that means I actually read 19 because The Naturals is downstairs. I read 19 out of 25 books physically, like that I physically own. That's so good. Like, I love that for me. Like, that's a perfect ratio. Like, I like to read books that I don't own because, like, there are just things that sometimes I'm like, oh, Kindle Unlimited, like, let me just pick her up. You know what I'm saying? Or, like, there are just some books that, like, I just don't own that I'm interested in. But there are a lot of books that I own that I am interested in. And I need to read those too. So I'm really, really glad that I've read so many books that I physically own. If you made it to the end, we are going to leave the smiley face emoji for my little smiley face cup. It's the one that looks exactly like this. And I will see y'all in my next video. Bye, everybody.
You got the nerve to be on me, faking your life like I do. If you got my number, don't have me, cause baby